Hello and welcome to Boxing in Your Face. My name is Joe Cortez, boxing referee from Las Vegas, Nevada. And this week we're going to talk about none other than the great George Foreman. Now, great George had a wonderful career. He had 76 wins, 68 by knockout, and only 5 losses. Now, he turned pro in 1969. Prior to turning pro, he won the heavyweight championship in the Olympics in 1968. Well, George Foreman went on to be a devastating, one of the hardest hitting heavyweights in the history of boxing. And George won the heavyweight championship against none other than Smoking Joe Frazier in 1973. And in that fight, a lot of folks felt that Joe Frazier, who was at the top of his game, was going to destroy Foreman because he felt that Foreman, only with a couple of years under his belt as a professional fighter, didn't have the experience. But you know what? He had a punch. And that knockout punch, which was devastating, put Frazier down on numerous occasions and stopping him in the second round by technical knockout. It was a fight that, how can I say, this fight was, it was so interesting because Joe Frazier had fought some of the great ones out there, but Joe Frazier was at the top of his game. And here comes a young George Foreman, knocks him out, and then he becomes heavyweight champion of the world, and then he goes on to fight other fights in between. But in between the Ali and the Frazier fight, he fought Ken Norton, who was also a real recognized heavyweight contender who had punching power in both hands, and he was able to TKO Ken Norton in the second round. That was back in 1974. Well, that same year, after that great win over Frazier and the great TKO over Ken Norton, he comes back and fights Muhammad Ali. And that fight was a fight that was watched by millions around the world. That was a fight that was called Rumble in the Jungle. That was in Zaire. Well, that's where Ali showed his experience and went with the rope-a-dope. And with the rope-a-dope, he was able to frustrate Foreman with that punching power that he had, but Ali was able to lay up on the ropes and back and hold by the head and hold him down. And it took so much strength out of George Foreman that in the 5th round, Ali hit him with a combination of punches and Foreman goes down. Well, you know, it was one of the most exciting heavyweight fights in the history of boxing because Muhammad Ali was not on the top of his game anymore. He was kind of going down, but he showed that he had the skills and the boxing skills of his, and that experience really got him over to become heavyweight champion of the world again. And then Foreman then decided to have a couple of fights in between. He came back and fought Joe Frazier again for the second time and knocked him out in the 5th round. Then he went out and had 2 or 3 other fights. Then he lost to none other than Jimmy Young. Jimmy Young was not one of the best heavyweight punchers in the history of boxing, but he was able to outbox Frazier, and he lost, Foreman, lost by a 12-round decision. And this was in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And then that's when Foreman felt that he had just about all in boxing. He felt that was it for him. He decides to retire, and retire for 10 years. 10 years, he goes into his wonderful life that he says today that he went to his Christian life. He became a preacher down in Texas and learned how to be a nice, humble man with a beautiful smile and learn how to deal with folks. I guess the 10 years of being a minister, he was able to change his style. George was not the most friendliest guy the first time around, but when he came back the second time, he was loved by everyone. He had a big smile on his face and started doing these commercials and the hamburger commercials and the automobile repair shop commercials. He did them all, and it was great. People got to love him again. He was fighting, making that comeback. So he made a comeback in I would say it was about 1987. Around there, give or take a year or so. And he came back and fought several fighters, knocking them all out, just about all of them. Then he fought Jerry Cooney. That fight was held in Atlantic City in 1990, of which I was the referee. And George Foreman showed that he still has that punching power. And he was really tell people, I'm going to come back, I'm going to be heavyweight champion of the world again. He was trying to psych himself to believe he could become heavyweight champion of the world. And you know what? In the real world, in life, that's what you got to think. If you're going to be a fighter or if you're going to be anything in life, have confidence in your abilities. Know that you can do it. Well, George Foreman did it. He knocked out Jerry Cooney in Atlantic City. He knocked him down once. But prior to him knocking out Jerry Cooney, in the first round, Cooney hit Foreman with a left hook at the end of the first round, kind of wobbled Foreman, and Foreman went back to that corner. And I was saying to myself, as a referee, I was saying to myself, wow, Foreman got rocked there a little bit. I'm going to keep my eyes open because anything can go ahead. George Foreman is a little bit older. He's down to, at the top George Foreman that we knew back in the early 70s. But here he is back in 1990, knocking out Jerry Cooney, who was considered a great white hope in boxing. And, well, like I said, he knocked him out in 2 rounds. Then, in between that, he came back, being that he knocked out all these fighters and maybe about 20-some-odd fighters and maybe went the distance once or twice in his whole career. He deserved the opportunity to fight for the heavyweight championship of the world again. And this time, he fought Evander Holyfield. And Evander Holyfield and George Foreman fought a great fight, especially in the 7th round, when it was a back and forth round. They were banging each other, had a crowd on their feet. But in the long run, George Foreman tried very hard, but lost a 12-round decision. This fight was held in Atlantic City. It was a great fight, a great showing for George Foreman, but not enough to win the fight on the judges' scorecard. Well, little by little, he kept fighting again, getting himself back in shape, and kept coming back. And in 1994, George Foreman reaches a level again to fight for the heavyweight championship of the world against none other than Michael Mora. Again, I had the honor and the privilege of refereeing that fight here in Las Vegas, Nevada. And in that fight, it was basically like a one-sided fight. I would believe that the three judges had Michael Mora winning just about every round. In the 10th round, Michael Mora started getting hit with some devastating jabs, some wicked left hooks, and I was saying to myself, why is he walking into these punches? He started moving to his left, he was moving to his right. Well, George Foreman just timed him, hit him with the left hook, and timed it just perfect, and hit it with a straight, wicked right hand. And when he hit Michael Mora with that wicked right hand, down goes Mora on his back. Foreman, I had to push him, and I thought I was pushing a brick wall because he was stunned himself. He couldn't believe that he knocked this guy out with one punch. I got him into that neutral corner. I picked up the count. I believe it was at 6, 7, 8. When I was there already, I said, this guy's not getting up. Because he showed no desire to get up. Maybe not a desire. I guess he couldn't. He was in a concussive episode. He was like on cloud 9. And when I said 10, Foreman just dropped to his knees and looked up and prayed to God, thank God that he won the heavyweight championship of the world. He was the oldest heavyweight to win the championship at the age of 45. Well, to this day, George Foreman was the oldest heavyweight champion in the history of boxing. And let me tell you one thing about George Foreman. George Foreman turned out to be one of the nicest individuals he did some commentating for HBO. He was great for boxing. He's like an ambassador to boxing after he won the heavyweight championship. You know what it is to win the championship just about 20 years apart? The first time back in the early 70s, and then wins it again back in 1994. I mean, that is unbelievable, unheard of. But George Foreman did it, and George Foreman will be remembered as one of the greatest heavyweights of all times. Of course, you have Ali, Rocky Marciano, and other great Holyfield, Riddick Bowe. You did a lot of individuals in the heavyweight division, but George Foreman will always stand out because people will remember him during the Olympic Games when he won the heavyweight championship, where he was parading around the ring with the American flag, and that really got the eyes and the attention of the fans around the world of a loyal American, proud American, and proud to win the heavyweight championship in the Olympics, and then become one of the great heavyweight champions of all times. Well, guys, with that said, I'll leave you this week. Next week, I'll come up with someone who you will very much love to hear more about. And that probably will be the great Carlos Ortiz, the former lightweight champion of the world, Carlos Ortiz. See you next week, guys.